The robot, now known as Dorbo, has a 6-motor 18-wheel drivetrain. What makes this a 6-motor 18-wheel drivetrain is each of these little things being a single wheel, 3 of them stacked up onto one axle, as you can see, attached to one motor. This amount of power is needed to quickly and accurately move the large and heavy robot. The chassis of the robot is primarily made out of steel, so these beams right here are steel going across. They're not solid, but they are made out of steel, with aluminum placed on top to help support the arm, as you can see here. So the aluminum distributes the weight from the arm to the corners of the robot in order to distribute the weight, so that all the motors are doing equal amounts of work and not one motor is doing more work than others. The arm is a three-axis arm with an end manipulator, as you can see here. Each joint is a Vex motor that is geared down to provide maximum torque, with the exception of the shoulder, which has 2 motors. So you can see geared, 2 motors, geared 1 motor, geared 1 motor, and then end manipulator that has its own motor. And this provides this is a 3-axis arm, and if you want to include it, when the robot spins, it adds a 4th axis. The arm itself is so heavy at the end here, and there's such a long lever arm from this point, that a counterweight is needed. A 5-pound counterweight is needed in order to support, or not in order to support, but in order to balance out this arm, so these motors can actually physically move the arm. The robot has 6 sensors that it uses to sense the world. So it has 3 cameras, 1 on each side and 1 on the arm up front here, and has 3 ultrasonic, 1 on the left, 1 on the right, and 1 on the front. The ultrasonic are used to detect where the walls are, and the cameras are used to detect signatures, which is what the robot uses to line itself up. Alright, so Dorbo's code is broken up into 2 big sections: the pre-main and main. Pre-main is just setting my variables and my functions. So these are my bools, which tell the cameras whether or not there's an object or not, or uses the cameras to tell the brain whether or not there's an object or not. These are my drive forward, turning left, turning in place, turning right, stopping. This is my follow. This is what uses to track the door handle, or track the door handle signature. A signature is it's essentially a piece of paper that the camera can see. This is the main section. Main section starts off with a calibration phase. Calibration phase is just the gyro calibrating, the motors setting their max torque, setting velocity, setting brake, spinning, stopping, and setting position. There's part and pre-part, and these are 2 different variables. Pre-part is lining up with the door. Part is moving forward and opening the door. Okay, so while both are 0, we're waiting for the button to be pressed. When the button is pressed, we move on to pre-part 1. Pre-part 1 is this section. Pre-part 1 is driving forward using acceleration code at a max speed of 60, until it sees the paper signature. When it sees the paper signature, it then lines itself up with the piece of paper and stops. Once it stops, we'll move on to pre-part 2. Pre-part 2 is simply raising the arm using the optical shafts within the motors to reach a desired angle. Okay, so we're spinning, we set velocity, we're spinning, then we stop. Okay, once we stop, we move on to pre-part 3. Pre-part 3 is turning left until the door handle signature is seen by the camera on the arm. So it's this section. Then it lines itself up with the piece of paper, stops, and then continues on to the next piece of code. Pre-part 4 is a debugging stage. Just can print whatever I want it to. It's just to know that the program is running properly. While part equals 1 is manual control. Manual control is used if the robot is hurting itself or the environment. Haven't had to use that a lot. Part equals 2 is the next part of code. It's just another debug section. It's just to know the program's running well. Part equals 3. So now we're moving on to it actually executing and opening the door. Part equals 3 is driving forward while tracking the door handle signature, and simultaneously doing that, detecting the distance away from the door, and once the robot is within a certain distance of the door, it then sets the part equal to 4. When part equals 4, it grabs the handle, then sets part equals 5. Part equals 5 is twisting the door handle. Part equals 6 is then driving backwards, opening the claw to let go of the door handle, and then it's driving back a little bit further and then stopping. The major thing I would change with the robot is the arm. The arm is what I had most difficulty with. The drivetrain took only about a week and a half to make, but the arm was extremely difficult. I would change a lot. One, I would make it almost entirely made out of aluminum, just to reduce weight, because it's so heavy. It needs really good weight distribution, which it gets moderate weight distribution, but it doesn't get really good weight distribution. So if it was lighter, I wouldn't need such a serious counterweight. And if it was lighter, it'd be more nimble, easier to control, stuff like that. Another thing I would do is I would try to get off of Vex arms in particular, or Vex motors anyways. Vex motors have this, within the shaft, have a lot of play. It's not super noticeable when you're using even just wheels, but when you have a distance this big, the play is really exaggerated out this far when you have a longer lever arm. That's one thing I would change. With the drivetrain, I would also change the drivetrain to mostly aluminum. This aluminum structure shafting is actually very, very strong, and I would construct the entire robot out of it just to keep down on weight. The robot itself weighed probably around 100 pounds, which made it very difficult to transport anywhere. Very difficult to work on if I wanted to put on the table. Just overall much more difficult. It's putting more work on the motors. It's however, there is an advantage of it being heavy, is that it can pull open the door and it doesn't get knocked over. That was an issue that you saw with some of the other door opening robots. They were too small and they would have to crank for their life just to open the door, just to pull the door open. And as you saw, this robot simply can just pull it open once it gets itself lined up properly.